This is Spencer Colgan, and welcome back to my wallpaper channel on YouTube, Wallpaper and Painting. Double cutting and trimming wallpaper are two aspects of wallpaper hanging that make the do-it-yourselfer confused. They've never seen it and they didn't anticipate it. But it also makes the paper hanger sometimes afraid to be straightforward with you. It intimidates the paper hanger, even good paper hangers, because usually, and this is true every time, usually paper that needs to be trimmed, table trimmed as we call it, meaning you trim it on site where you're hanging it. Usually those products are high-end products and they are very expensive. And paper hangers don't want to inherit the liability for making a mistake. And so they will reject the job. If you're a paper hanger and you're a professional, you know that you've become accustomed to asking people when they call you, what type of paper do you want me to hang? And you also know that you're looking for information relative to whether or not you have to trim it either by double cutting on the wall or by table trimming. Now, when I started hanging paper, there were different markers on the wallpaper that indicated table trim it. And because they were not, and they still are not, all universal in their marks, sometimes you have to figure it out. Sometimes your product doesn't come with instructions. I love that. Or sometimes the instructions say, if this is a table trim product, what do you mean, if? If you're sending the product out, you should know whether it's a table trim product. And so, if you're confused, I understand why. The instructions, and I'm not here to badmouth people, I'm not. This is the world of wallpaper hanging. But if you get instructions that confuse you, it's because you're dealing with a large-scale manufacturing operation that sends out instructional papers to folks who buy their A paper, their B paper, their C paper, and their D paper. And rather than printing 4 different sets of instructions, they send you a sheet of instructions. And sometimes, although rarely, the instructions are wrong. And I have a video on that I did, I think, a year ago or more, that said, don't follow the instructions, something to that effect. So I'm going to show you a product right now that is gorgeous. And you know what is something unique about it that tells me I've hung this before? I don't mean I've hung this pattern before, because I have, but it's scallops. So scallops are scallops. But the smell is distinct. And I've hung it before. And it's what's called a screen print. And you'll see some manufacturers, they'll call it hand painted. Well, it's a screen print. And let me show you what I mean. Let's bring you right to the table. This stuff, I love this stuff. I'm smelling it. It has that distinct smell. You see these? These are the colors that they use This is that color. This is obviously that color, and so on. So if you needed to match the colors, look. It's beautiful stuff. So now if you get this, you might be confused as to these symbols, right? This join, this mark. And you see that one? If you miss that one, you're in trouble. That mark. Now, with screen prints, by the way, if you ever get circles, I'm just going to say this right now, because I hung a Bradbury and Bradbury, beautiful stuff. With circles, I don't recommend hanging any wallpaper with circles unless you're going to trim it on the wall. Now, these are not circles, and this is not what I'm referring to. I'll tell you why. When you have a perfectly round circle, relying on a trim cut and thinking that it's going to match on the wall are two separate things. With screen prints, you have an 1/8 of an inch, what do they call that? 1/8 of an inch, you know when you give somebody a little window of mistake, margin of error? They call it something. I just can't. I feel like Joe Biden. They give you a little playroom. Wiggle room, that's what I was looking for. Wiggle room. So, you know you're going to trim on this line. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. You're going to trim right up here. Your lines are going to come up here. But if you should go off of this straightness and you go like this, watch this. See that? See I'm moving my knife? Guess what? There's an 1/8 of an inch in this pattern where it's replicated. There's a wiggle room. In other words, if you're within an 1/8 of an inch of this line, it's an 1/8 of an inch, not a lot of room. That's an 1/8 of an inch right there. That's it. So there's some wiggle room. Where the pattern will still match. However, if you're hanging circles, don't rely on wiggle room. I would trim the selve edge, which is this waist here. Trim it right to here if you're doing circles. Trim it right to here. When you get it on the wall, overlap it and double cut it. Because the circles will not match up all the time. It's hit or miss. So let's talk about table trimming. Okay? And when I hung that Bradbury and Bradbury last year, I gave you some different suggestions. Different than those I'm offering today. Okay? In the last video, I said you should measure from this edge. It's time consuming. And you'll see there's a difference between this edge and this line. And this edge here and this line. You'll see that there may be a 1/16 of an inch off sometimes. But the way to quickly remedy that issue is to get yourself a straight edge. And this is heavy metal. Okay? This is not a ruler. This is heavy. And it's not going to flex when you're cutting it. And I'm going to go, see that trim line? I'm going to go right up to that trim line. And then I'm going to take my straight edge and go right up to the other trim line. Bring it down. Right outside that line. Let's see. Just outside. You don't want to go on it because you're going to see black. You're not going to get that whole line. You want to get rid of that whole line. And so, you want to do it right there. But you want that the whole thing be cut in the same manner. And so you want to do the same thing here. So with my hand pressed firmly down against this edge, I'm going to cut right up against the line. Now here's the thing. If you have a blade that's obstructed by something here, right? Or as you're going down, you're wiggling. That's going to affect the straightness of your cut. You want to take a position, and whatever it is, whether it be like this or like this, it has to be the same throughout. You can't start like this and then turn it to this and then think you're going to do this or like this. It'll affect the straightness of your cut. You have to choose a position. I have my blade extended as far out as possible. I'm using a very good retractable blade system, and I'm cutting through it. Okay? You might say, why don't you use a single edge? There's no need to use a single edge on this thing. You're trimming off waste. It's not going to benefit anything if you use a single edge here. Okay? And single edges are more expensive than this. Okay, let's do that. Now I want to show you that these lines do not appear on the paper as often as I'd like them to. So you never want to trim off the whole selvage and leave yourself in no man's land where you don't have another marker. So I'm going to leave that one in place, leave it intact, and just trim the rest. Okay? What I mean is this, look. I left that one intact. See this marker right here? I left it intact because I want to use that for the rest of it. Okay? So if you have a wallpaper table, you'll use this little shelf system to put your straight edge there. I know the veterans know all of this. I'm not concerned about the veterans. I'm talking to the folks who are educated in the school of hard knocks. You know? Because I got to tell you something about professionals. They tend to think who they are. They do. They tend to, I hate to say this, I'm going to get a lot of bad press out of this, but wallpaper hangers think who they are. You know? A lot of egos in paper hanging. Okay, so you see why I left this intact? Because now I have a metric with which to cut a straight line, joining it to the rest of them. You see, if I had trimmed this right here, I'm relying on the straightness all the way up here. And then I'm going to try to join this line with the edge of this. No good. You want a line. So don't trim that one off. So here I am again. Here's my straight edge. Here's the line I didn't trim off. So I'm bringing it right up against there, right? And I go all the way up here, right? Where is it? There it is. Okay? And you see, I'm not going to trim that one off. Can you see it right there? Okay, check it again in case it moved, and just trim. Then I'm going to take my knife, holding this down firmly with my other hand, drag that knife. And again, I'm leaving that line intact. For the last piece that I have to trim, and again, this is called a selvage. And the selvage is that bleed. That's what it's called. It's bleed. It's what's going to be thrown out. It's that piece from the edge all the way up until the trim line. Now, do you see this amount sticking out from underneath the metal? That'll screw you up. right there. So if I didn't have my marker here, if I went ahead and mindlessly trimmed this off, let's make believe that's not there because I didn't pay attention to Spencer. I trimmed it off. I know what I'm doing. I'm the best and all of that baloney. I'm going to be using this as my marker. But that's not going to give you a true reading of your cut. Because you'll never get it right. You'll over trim it or you'll under trim it. This line, however, is the line against which you want to trim your wallpaper with your blade. As you can see, the wallpaper sticks out slightly by a hair, doesn't it? Even with this, with the full line showing. Okay? And that, therefore, is the marker you want to use, not this. So if you're using this as a marker, look, you're going to go like this. You're going to cover all that wallpaper, and look what happens. You're not going to have a straight cut. So, please, does everyone understand this? Okay? So I'm going to have wallpaper sticking out. So don't make that mistake to say, well, as long as I cover the wallpaper. This is where you need to be. And therefore, this is where you need to be. And so when you trim it, your result will be one beautiful, sharp line. Trust me, I didn't get this good overnight. But you know what? I didn't have a nice guy making videos on YouTube for free that you can buy for like $100. I'm giving you the fruits of my labor, free. Take it and go paper the world with it. It's all free. No one else is going to share this information with you. No one's going to take the time to do it. So there you go. Look at that beautiful line. And I haven't always done this good. I'm sharing with you my knowledge after having failed to do this correctly. Okay? But I hope you click on like, first of all. Click on like and please make a comment. Because if you make a comment like, great job, thank you, I learned so much, it takes you 20 seconds and it does a lot more for me in terms of getting my video out there and circulated on YouTube. Thank you. So rather than waste time spinning the paper around, just come around to the other side of your table using your strong hand to cut and do the same thing, this time starting up there and come down here. Now, I know I changed the wallpaper. I had calls that I had to deal with in between my last frame and this frame, but it's the same wallpaper, different color, same idea, trimming on the side. But I wanted to tell you on this frame that after you work this side, you don't want to unnecessarily bend the wallpaper and risk crinkling it irreparably. So you walk around the other side and you simply trim down here. So although this wallpaper is the same company, etc., the trim lines are slightly different. The idea being the same. You pull that trim line and your straight edge real close. And you do it down here too, and you just trim against your steel edge. When you're done trimming, you'll have something like this, a strip from each side, and this is what you'll be left with. A perfectly straight edge. Now, if you are thinking as I am thinking, or have thought, why do companies do this? I can tell you something. I think you may be an excellent paper hanger, while not so good a table trimmer. Why they do this baffles me. If I were manufacturing this product, look at how gorgeous it is. Isn't it possible that the company who makes this can have this trimmed at the factory? Wouldn't you want something machine trimmed rather than hand trimmed? If you're the manufacturer, you want this to look its best, right? If there's room for error on the table or with the do-it-yourselfer, why would a company risk losing the beauty of the wallpaper because of an error on the table by the hanger or by the owner? Here's what happens. People say, oh, I love it. I can't do this. It's too hard. I'll get something else. If a manufacturer is listening to this video, you're silly for doing this. This doesn't help sell your product. It makes it more difficult for you to sell the product because there are paper hangers who will not risk blowing this edge and this edge. And there are homeowners that don't understand it, they don't know what to do, and they just say, I'm getting something else. So question is, why would you put that self edge on here? If you want to put a self edge, fine. Make it perforated so I can just go like this, just pull it off. But you don't do that. You make me act like a machine and trim this perfectly. And the last time I checked, machines do a lot better job than the human hand does. Now this is straight only after many, many faults and errors with previous products. But I think if the manufacturer consulted with paper hangers, they'd sell a lot more of this stuff because they wouldn't put that edge here. People would buy more of it. You see, in today's world, with all of the reviews online, on Facebook, on this and on that, there's too many opportunities for consumers to badmouth the product like this. Information is so readily available today that if I were a manufacturer, I would see the impact that leaving this self edge has on selling it. And then trimming it and seeing over the course of 6 to 12 months, what if anything changed? I would bet that if they took this off, the price to install this would be cheaper, more people would buy it, and you'd have more positive reviews on it. There's no way the do-it-yourselfer is going to just do this the first time and succeed. They're going to trim too much of it off and there's going to be gaps. Anyway, that's my spiel. Please click on like and tell me what you think. Thank you for watching.